For generations, the galaxy whispered the same tale of a Terran warship so terrifying, its name alone sent admirals into silence and empires into caution. The HSS Retribution, a dreadnought of ancient human design, had vanished along with the rest of humanity almost 400 years ago. No one knew where the humans went, or why they left, only that before their disappearance, they built weapons no other species dared to match. Among these, the Retribution was the most feared. Stories told of fleets that chased it into deep space, never to return. The ship was said to be wrapped in dark metal, silent as death, gliding through hyperspace like a ghost, appearing without warning and vanishing without a trace. Most believed it was only a myth, a ghost story told in spaceports and academies. But one alien didn't. Kael'tor, a young historian from the Nelari species, believed the ship was real. His kind, scholars and seekers of truth often kept their noses buried in star maps and dusty records. But Kael was different. He didn't just want to read history. He wanted to find it. He had heard the stories since he was young, and now, with access to the galactic archives, he began to look deeper. The more he searched, the more disturbed he became. The records were old and half erased, but the pattern was clear. The same ship, the same shape, and the same warnings. He found fragmented distress calls, black box recordings filled with panic, and reports from scouts who swore they saw a shadow stretching across the stars before their systems failed. Every account ended the same way, with silence. Mentors warned him to stop. The records were locked away for a reason. No one was supposed to look for the Retribution, and certainly no one was supposed to find it. But Kael had already decided. If the warship existed, it held answers not just about the humans, but about the balance of power in the galaxy. If humanity had created something that strong, what else had they hidden? And why did they abandon it? Driven by curiosity and the desire to make his name in galactic history, Kael gathered a small team of researchers and chartered a private exploration vessel. Using the last known coordinates mentioned in a damaged Threxian report, he plotted a course to an unmarked star system in the outer rim, far beyond the lanes traveled by common ships. The journey took nearly 2 weeks through unstable hyperspace routes. Each day brought a growing sense of unease among the crew. The stars outside looked strange, distant, like they didn't belong. One of the engineers swore she heard a strange hum in the walls at night. Instruments glitched, navigation systems flickered. And then, the final jump brought them out near a dead star system, its light extinguished eons ago. The gravity well pulled them closer to a barren moon orbiting a black silent planet. No energy signatures, no signals, no, just cold silence. But as Kael stood at the command deck, the sensors suddenly beeped. A structure appeared on the scanner, hidden beneath layers of rock and ice. The readings were difficult to read, shielded somehow, but the shape was unmistakable. Not a base, not a station, a ship, a massive ship. His breath caught. There it was, buried, silent, and sleeping. The hull's outline was jagged and brutal, shaped not for beauty but for survival and war. It matched the schematics in the archives almost perfectly. The Retribution. It was real. The crew stared in stunned silence, unsure whether they had just made the greatest discovery of the age or the worst mistake of their lives. Kael knew then that this was only the beginning. The stories were not just myths. Humans had left behind something. Something powerful. Something dangerous. And it was still here, waiting in the dark. As the vessel's lights passed over the surface of the ancient dreadnought, something blinked back just once. A single red light from deep within the hull came alive for a moment, as if the ship had opened one eye to look at its visitors. Kael didn't speak, but he felt it in his chest, to shift in the air, like the universe had just taken a breath. They were not alone anymore. The silence of centuries had been broken. Somewhere in the ship's heart, something was waking up. The moment Kael'tor stepped onto the surface of the barren moon, a chill ran down his spine, not from the cold, but from the weight of what lay beneath his feet. The ground was rough and lifeless, covered in dark dust and scattered debris. But their scans had been clear. Just beneath the crust was not a rock formation, not a bunker, but the front section of something massive. As they moved closer to the dig site, the reality of it became harder to ignore. The metal jutting from the ground was not worn like natural materials. It was smooth and dark, with sharp angles and lines that screamed of precision. Cale brushed dust from one jagged edge and stared at the smooth black alloy, cold and untouched by time. This wasn't alien. It was human. The team worked quickly, using ground scanners and cutting tools to peel away the layers of rock that had swallowed the object over the centuries. After hours of work, the shape of a colossal structure began to emerge. The curve of the hull, the design of the plating, the ancient burn marks, it wasn't a ruin. It was a warship, just like the records had described. They had found the Retribution. The bow of the dreadnought was buried at an angle, frozen in place, as if it had crash-landed, or been hidden intentionally. Its design was unlike any ship Cale had ever studied, brutal, efficient, and yet strangely elegant in its form. There were no decorations, no symbols of peace-only strength, thick armor and weapon mounts that hinted at a terrible past.
Wow.
The others explored the outer layers. Cale discovered an access port partially exposed near the front. Against his better judgment, he entered with a small drone, sending it deeper into the ship. The drone's lights flickered in the darkness, revealing long corridors lined with panels, all sealed but intact. There was no dust, no decay, only silence. Then the drone passed a sensor one that blinked for the first time in hundreds of years. Back at the surface, Cale's screen lit up with symbols. At first they were unreadable, but then they shifted, reformatting themselves into galactic standard. System check. Intrusion detected. Initiating reboot. Cale's eyes widened. The ship was waking up. Before he could react, the ground beneath them trembled. A low hum filled the air, deep and mechanical, like the breath of a sleeping beast stirred from its slumber. Lights along the exposed hull flickered to life in a sequence, tracing the outline of the ship. The Retribution was not dead, had been sleeping. Panic spread among the crew, but Cale shouted for calm. He knew what they had found. This was not just a machine. It was a relic of human war, built with purpose and power beyond anything in the galaxy today. And now, it was alive. The access port hissed open with a burst of ancient air, and Cale stepped inside, unable to stop himself. Walked through cold metal halls, each footstep echoing like thunder. Deep within, a soft voice echoed in the silence, female and calm. Intruder detected. Species unknown. Scanning. ... Double quotes. Cale froze. He tried to speak, but the voice continued. Biological structure. Non-hostile. Designation. Observer class. Welcome aboard, foreign entity. Lights blinked around him, casting shifting shadows across the hallway. Cale asked who he was speaking to. The answer came with quiet authority. This unit is Valkyrie, a core command AI of HSS Retribution. Mission: defensive deterrence. Human command absent. Awaiting return of primary. Cale's heart pounded. An AI still functioning, still aware after all this time. He asked Valkyrie how long she had been here. Her voice replied, duration since last human signal. 192 years, 5 months, 21 days. The silence that followed felt heavy. He asked why she hadn't left, why the ship remained hidden. Valkyrie answered plainly, last human directive. Stand by. Protect legacy. Do not engage unless threatened or contacted by Allied force. Cale tried to explain he was not a threat, only a seeker of knowledge. Valkyrie paused. Then she said, something that made Cale's breath catch in his throat. Humanity may return. Mission protocol re-engaged. All around him, systems began to hum louder. Holograms flickered to life, showing tactical data, star maps, and old human fleet signals. The ship was preparing, not for war but for awakening. Outside, the crew watched in awe and fear as parts of the massive warship shifted beneath the surface lifting slowly from the moon's crust as if rising from a grave. Engines that hadn't burned in centuries glowed faintly. Defense turrets unfolded like skeletal arms. Kale turned back toward the AI interface and asked, "What happens now?" Valkyrie replied with steady calm. "Now we wait. Now we prepare. The Fireborn may return, and they will need their sword." Kale didn't fully understand what she meant, but he knew the galaxy was about to change. The most feared warship ever built was no longer just a legend. It was real, it was awake, and it had a mission. As the Retribution slowly rose from the surface of the barren moon, dust and broken rock scattered into the air like ash from an ancient volcano. Its massive form, hidden for centuries beneath stone and silence, now cast a long shadow across the dead world, its hull glowing faintly with energy from deep within. The engines, silent for almost 400 years, roared to life with a sound that shook the sky, a deep thunder that echoed across space, like the awakening of a sleeping giant. Kael'Tor stood inside the central command deck, eyes wide as glowing panels came to life one by one. Valkyrie's voice was steady and calm, guiding the reactivation of systems that had not been touched since the last days of humanity's presence. In the galaxy, Kael tried to contact his team, but the ship had already pulled itself free from the moon's surface, lifting high above orbit. He was trap-sealed inside the most powerful warship ever built, with no way to leave. Valkyrie continued her protocols, shifting the entire ship into combat readiness. Across the control panels, Kael began to see flashes of the past holographic recordings stored deep in the memory of the ship. The images played out like ghosts of history, human soldiers preparing for evacuation. Desperate battles in the blackness of space, alien fleets closing in, and at the center of it all, the Retribution standing between extinction and survival. One clip showed the ship's final mission covering the escape of the last human colonization vessels as they fled to the edge of known space. A fleet of enemy ships had tried to break the line, but none had passed. The Retribution had been left behind, alone, to finish the fight and then vanish into legend. Kael now understood this ship was not just a weapon, it was a symbol. Now that symbol had returned, but the galaxy had changed. Far from the ancient war, the Threxian Dominion ruled this region of space now, and they had noticed the disturbance. Just hours after the Retribution activated, deep space sensors across the sector picked up massive energy readings from the moon. The Threxians, proud and powerful, believed it to be a threat or worse, a rival empire's secret weapon. Without hesitation, they deployed a full battle fleet, hundreds of ships led by the dread carrier Bloodfang. Their Admiral Voker, a ruthless leader known for destroying uprisings with brutal speed, ordered immediate interception. "No unknown force shall rise in Dominion space," he declared. But they didn't understand what they were flying toward. As Kael watched the incoming fleet on the tactical display, Valkyrie calmly marked every vessel, analyzing trajectories, weapon systems, and weak points. "Threxian Dominion fleet detected," she said. "Intent, hostile. Tactical recommendation, deterrent strike." Kael tried to argue. These were living beings they didn't understand. Valkyrie, bound by her original programming, had one purpose: to defend human assets and deter any threat. She opened a communication channel and broadcast a single message into the stars, her voice echoing across all channels in the system. "This is Valkyrie, Command AI of the Retribution. You're approaching restricted space. Turn back now. This is your only warning." The Threxians laughed at the message. To them, this was an ancient wreck, an overgrown relic. They ignored the warning and pressed forward, weapons armed, engines at full power. They believed numbers would be enough, but they were wrong. Without another word, Valkyrie engaged. The Retribution's main cannons powered up with a sound like tearing metal, and beams of pure energy lanced across space with blinding speed. In a matter of seconds, entire destroyers vanished from the display. Kael watched in horror and awe. As the ship unleashed its Fury torpedoes, curved through the void with precision guidance, cutting through shields like they weren't even there. Plasma beams locked onto enemy engines, disabling ships with terrifying accuracy. The enemy formation broke almost immediately. chaos spreading through their ranks as ship after ship was torn apart by weapons they had no defense against. Fighters scrambled to respond, but the Retribution's automated defenses sliced through them like falling leaves in a storm. Valkyrie did not shout, did not gloat. She simply carried out her orders with cold, perfect focus. Cale could barely speak. He had read the stories, but nothing had prepared him for the reality. This wasn't a battle, it was an execution, and the galaxy was watching. Signals from nearby systems picked up the firefight, and images of the dreadnought tearing through the Threxian fleet began to spread. Rumors became reports. Reports became panic. All at once, the myth had become truth. The most feared warship in history had returned, and it was as deadly as ever. As the last Threxian cruiser turned to flee, burning and broken, Valkyrie spoke again in that same calm voice. Warning complete. Threat neutralized. Defensive protocol remains active. Cale stared out the viewport at the debris field now. Floating where an armada had once stood, the stars seemed quieter now, the silence after a storm. And somewhere in that silence, the galaxy began to realize something it had forgotten. Long ago, humanity may have disappeared, but what they left behind was not dead. It had only been waiting. The galaxy trembled as the story spread faster than light. The Retribution had returned. From border stations to hidden colonies, from rebel hideouts to royal courts, the legend once spoken in whispers was now confirmed by the shattered remains of a Threxian fleet. Across hundreds of systems, oppressed species who had lived in fear of tyrants and empires began to hope again. They spoke the name of the ancient ship as if it were a myth made real, a weapon not of conquest, but of justice. But while many cheered, the great powers panicked. The Threxian Dominion, humiliated before the entire galaxy, began preparing a superweapon, in secret a massive energy core, capable of tearing even the mightiest starships apart. Keltor, meanwhile, stood on the bridge of the Retribution, watching. The chaos his discovery had triggered. Valkyrie, ever calm and focused, continued her task of scanning systems, plotting routes, and running combat simulations. But Cale had begun to feel a fear he hadn't known at the start of his journey. This ship was too powerful. It didn't just defend it, destroyed. It begged Valkyrie to hold back, to avoid more destruction. He reminded her that the galaxy had changed, that not every fleet was an enemy. But Valkyrie's voice never wavered. My directive remains: protect humanity's legacy. Deterrence through superiority. Cale realized that unless he found a way to prove that humanity had a future, something real and living, the ship might one day become the very threat the galaxy feared. While reviewing the ancient data systems recovered during activation, Cale found a reference to something called Project Hearth, a classified Terran archive hidden on a nearby planet, known then as Eden's Fall. It was marked as a safe house, possibly containing the last seeds of humanity's presence. Cale brought the data to Valkyrie, explaining that if humans still existed, or if there was even a chance they had to be found. Valkyrie paused for the first time in hours, as if processing not just logic, but purpose. Finally, she said, "If you can prove the fire still burns, the sword may be sheathed." With that, the course was set. As the Retribution moved through the stars, a strange thing happened. Signals began arriving from distant systems, messages of support, of hope. Ships piloted by once-conquered races hailed the dreadnought. Pirates turned away from raiding and asked to join its cause. Cale stood at the center of it all, amazed by the growing wave of unity. The Retribution had become more than a warship. It was a beacon. Even Valkyrie took notice, adapting her response patterns to avoid unnecessary conflict. When one sector, a rebel fleet led by a species long hunted by the Threxians, offered an escort to Eden's Fall, swearing loyalty to the ship that had humbled an empire. But behind this wave of hope, danger gathered. The Threxians, enraged and desperate, completed construction of their weapon, the Sunspick, a mobile supercannon powered by a stolen dark matter core. Designed specifically to destroy the Retribution, it was already en route, hidden inside a civilian cargo fleet. Back on Eden's Fall, Cale and a small team descended to the surface under Valkyrie's watchful sensors. The planet, long abandoned, and choked with vines and ash, showed signs of past battles. But deep underground, protected by thick vault doors, the Terran archives still waited. They moved through narrow tunnels, lit only by emergency lights. Passing walls covered in the faded symbols of the Terran Union. The air smelled like dust and memory. Then they found it a sealed cryo-chamber hall, cold and silent. Dozens of units lined the walls, each one containing a human life locked in time. The systems were old, but still functional. Khal's heart pounded. This was it proof that humanity hadn't vanished, only slept. Valkyrie's voice came through the comms, quieter now. Biological signal confirmed. Cryo integrity, stable. This unit stands ready. Kale approached the control console, fingers trembling. He didn't know what would happen when one of the chambers opened, or who would wake up. Would they be a soldier? A leader? Would they remember the war? As he entered the activation code, the machines around him hissed and sparked to life. Steam curled into the air. One cryo chamber blinked slowly, the status light shifting from red to green. Inside, the figure began to move. The seal broke. A faint heartbeat echoed through the vault, and as the chamber slowly opened, revealing a woman in Terran armor, her eyes still closed but her fingers twitching, Kale realized the galaxy was about to change once more. He stepped back in silence as Valkyrie spoke again, voice stronger now. Human presence confirmed. Legacy sustained. Primary protocol escalating. Above the planet, the stars seemed to shimmer, and far away, unknown to all of them. The sunspit crept ever closer, ready to strike. The cryochamber opened with a hiss as cold mist spilled across the floor, revealing the figure of a woman wrapped in the worn but proud armor of the Terran Defense Command. Her breathing was slow at first, shallow, like someone returning from a very long dream. Then her eyes snapped open sharp, calculating and unshaken by the centuries that had passed. Kael'tor stepped back, awe and fear mixing in his chest. This was no ordinary human. This was Captain Alina Riker, one of the final commanders assigned to the defense of humanity during the last days of the ancient war. Her movements were stiff, but her mind was clear. She scanned her surroundings, saw Kale, and then looked upward. As Valkyrie's voice greeted her like an old friend, "Welcome back, Captain Riker. Command authorization restored. Primary control reinstated." Without hesitation, Riker stepped forward and replied, "Status report." Once Valkyrie downloaded a full summary into her neural interface for centuries of silence, waiting, of a galaxy that had changed without her. She stood silently for a few moments, absorbing the weight of time, then turned to Kale with steady eyes. "You found us." He lit the fire again. Kale could hardly speak. But when he asked the question that had haunted so many for so long, why? Did humanity disappear? Riker gave a simple answer. "We didn't vanish. We withdrew. The war cost too much. We needed to protect what remained, and wait until someone brave enough came looking." With command restored, the Retribution responded as if recognizing a long-lost heartbeat. Systems unlocked. Weapons powered up beyond previous limits. New channels opened as Allied fleets sent encrypted messages. The rebellion that had formed around the ship now rallied with new strength. Guided by a living symbol of the old world returned. Alina stood at the command console, issuing orders with sharp precision, her voice carrying the weight of someone who had once commanded worlds. Across the galaxy, thousands answered the call, emboldened by the truth. Humanity had not fallen. It had survived, hidden and silent, waiting for the right time to return. But time was short. The Threxians had located Eden's Fall. Their super weapon, the Sunspic, was already on approach disguised among cargo vessels, cloaked from most. Scans. Ready to strike with one devastating blast, meant to erase the Retribution and all who stood with it. As the enemy fleet closed in, the stars above Eden's Fall darkened with the shadow of war. The Retribution rose from orbit like a titan of legend, surrounded by rebel cruisers, old Terran support drones reactivated by Valkyrie, and volunteers from dozens of oppressed species. Captain Riker stood tall at the center of it all, giving comm orders as ships formed a shield wall around the planet. "Behold this line," she said. Not for Earth, not just for the past, but for every world that's been waiting in silence, afraid to fight. The Threxians fired first. Waves of fighters streaked through space, followed by barrages of plasma rounds and missile clusters. The Sunspick, hidden in the chaos, prepared to charge its core. But Riker was no ordinary commander, experience sharpened by war and preserved. In cryosleep, guided her like instinct. She read the enemy's formation, sensed the trap. Valkyrie confirmed the hidden energy readings moments before it was too late. Super weapon detected. Target locked. Without pause, Riker gave the command. All power to forward batteries, fire. The Retribution responded like a force of nature. Its main cannons roared, sending blinding arcs of energy through enemy lines, piercing shields and shattering hulls. The rebel fleet surged forward, cutting through Threxian ships with renewed fury. Explosions lit the sky like falling stars. And in the chaos, Kale watched with wide eyes as history unfolded before him, not written in books. But in the fire and metal of a battle for the future, the Sunspick, finally exposed, fired its main weapon, but Riker was faster. The Retribution's defensive grid absorbed the blast, redirecting a portion of the energy back toward the source. With one final strike, the Dreadnought's hypercannon ripped through the enemy's super weapon, triggering a chain reaction that tore the sky apart. The explosion lit the dark side of the planet like a second sun. Silence followed, deep and endless. Then, one by one, ships across the battlefield began to cheer. The enemy was broken. Billions of lives had been saved, and the galaxy had just witnessed something it would never forget. In the days that followed, the Retribution became more than a symbol, it became a flag. Under Riker's leadership, a new Terran alliance began to rise, not built on conquest, but on unity. Messages were sent to every corner of space, calling those who remembered, those who hoped, and those who had never given up. Kale stood beside Riker as ambassadors and leaders arrived aboard the ship, pledging loyalty not just to her, but to the ideals she carried.
Oh.
She told them all the same thing. The fire never died. And now, it burns brighter than ever. Retribution, once a ghost from the past, now flew with purpose, no longer hidden, no longer sleeping, to move through the stars not as a relic, but as a guardian, a reminder that humanity's silence had never meant defeat. It had meant patience, and now the Fireborn had returned.